Go where your best prayers take you, unclench the fists of your spirit and take it easy. Breathe deeply of the glad air and live one day at a time. Know that you are precious and learn to trust. Amen. Well, good morning to all of you. You must have set your clocks correctly. Hope you're the early church crew, boy, were they asleep. Of course, it was like 7 o'clock or 6 or whatever. Hope we're all a little more awake, at least the sun's out. But anyway, good morning. It's Lent. We've got a lot going on, lots of things. I hope you'll pick up one of the flyers around, a little bit of an advertisement. Wonderful class on Sunday mornings about how to use the rosary. On Thursday nights, have a thing on contemplative prayer that's wonderful. Thank you for a bunch of people signing up to run the donut race today. A big hardship. You have to eat donuts and run. Go figure, I can't quite figure that out. But raising good money for the Volunteer Ministry Center. Many of you are doing that. I want to say hello to Jeremy Graham, who's with us today. He works in a fabulous ministry called True Promise, a recovery ministry for men. We're glad you're with us today. And Gil and Penny Heinsohn are a big part of that. So lots of stuff and lots of people and all the families here for baptism. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. How many of you either went through Google Chrome or whatever you use to get to the internet and went through the Google search engine on Friday or Saturday? How many of you did that? Anybody? A few? And do you remember what you saw? No, you don't? No, okay, no. But it was really cool because Google was written in wonderful colors, and then one of the O's in Google was huge, like this. It was big. And then there was this thing at the bottom, and I realized, I looked and I thought, is it a flower? And I realized, no, it's the symbol for female. And then I noticed around the Google logo were all these dancing things that I thought were dancing flowers. They were dancing female figures, and they were red and pink and green. They were really cool. And then when you clicked on the O, there was a little click-on sign. You clicked on it, and then this fabulous video started with this great music, and it was women from around the world. It was really fabulous. And women in all parts of the world doing all kind of jobs, scientists, engineers, pilots, women raising children in a village in Africa. It was just really fabulous. And went on a little bit, and at the end it closed, and it was just a nice little piece. Anybody know why it was there? Thank you. One person does. You win the prize. Tom's got your prize later. Yes, it is yesterday was International Women's Day. It started in 1908. It was started by 15,000 women showing up in New York City to march and protest about living wages, about better job opportunities and job conditions. By the next year, that movement that had started in the United States and around New York spread throughout the world, and it became an international kind of thing. In fact, it's way bigger in other places than it is in the United States. 28 countries recognize it as an actual holiday, as an actual real day to stop and celebrate. Many of the countries, almost every country, practices something around International Women's Day. Some of the countries even make it a Mother's Day, which is really cool. So you get a gift for your mom or your grandmom in Thanksgiving in recognition of their benefit to your life. So, I really did have another beginning to this sermon until that. And I thought, how ironic, but also how serendipitous that we read the Genesis passage at the same time we're thinking about International Women's Day. You know the passage. We just read it. You know that passage, and you know kind of even more fully the whole story because there's a lot more to it. You know, that story of the snake and the Garden of Eden and the woman being beguiled and then beguiling the man, and they eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then my favorite part's when the man gets caught, which they're always going to get caught. You always get caught. What's he say? The woman made me do it. Good answer. I love it. It's the woman's fault. Well, it's fun to think about. Unfortunately, it got played out, though, over time in serious ways. See, it was the woman's fault because she was the inferior sex. She was the inferior creature. Of course, it was her fault. The notion played its way forward in Judaism, not as a main voice, but always as a voice there. One rabbi wrote this: "Better is the wickedness of a man than a woman who does good." It is a woman who brings shame and disgrace. You see an interpretation of what that story means directly. Christianity took that and played it forward as well. It was written that women, being inferior creatures, probably had inferior souls. And it doesn't take long before an inferior soul actually gets written that women have no souls at all. Now that may be like a little jaunt of history for you, and I guess it is. But actually it's current history for me. Recently, a younger woman, mother in our parish, told me that she had really thought about quitting church. Came into church and was kind of thinking about it and had another reason, because it was one of these passages. Thought she knew what it meant. Pretty harsh words about women, divorce, remarriage. Thankfully, Tom was preaching and talked about how often we see these passages literally. We remember them from some time before. We haven't revisited them often. And helped us uncover another way to think about the passage, about how to take it in, think about it in a different and larger context. I was at a training session on Friday, and George Dobler sitting out here said something wonderful. He's talking about how we get in debates about Scripture. Instead of debating, he'll always ask this general question, which I just find wonderful. Okay, I get your point, but what more? What more could Scripture be saying to us? And I guess I'm predicating, often we need a little what more. And this passage is one of them that needs a little what more. It is written from a viewpoint of thousands of years ago, probably 4,000. So if you don't know that, you do now. That these stories come from an ethos a long time ago. Life, and that life is hard and full of risks, isn't it? That's what the story's telling us. It goes on to talk about those things, about their punishment and those things. What they're reflecting about is life is tough, it's difficult. It's often their work is endless and overwhelming. And even something as wonderful as childbearing, having a sweet child, has this danger and pain associated. What the story reflects, if we really stop to think, is saying, why? Why is life this way? Why is life so hard? Do you see? What this story really is about is something different than maybe you've ever thought about. It's about being human. What does it mean to live a human life? That's what they're writing about in Genesis. I know you may have learned a lot of other things. I want to ask George Dobler's question. What more? The what more is, what else do we see? We see people wrestling with real life. And if we took this passage and tried to make it our passage, what would we say about real life? How is your real life? What is your life like? Not mine. What's your life like if you really slow down to think about it? Well, I think a couple of thoughts. So go with me on two of my trends. One is, yes, we would still say the same thing. Life is often hard. Remember Scott Peck in his great book, The Road Less Traveled, starts out with life is difficult. Great quintessential comment, and I've never forgotten it. Life is difficult. But you know, I think we would add something else. In our culture, in 21st century society in America, I think we would also say that life is stressful. I was reading a recent study, a big study of thousands of people. 90% of the respondents said that they experience high stress regularly. And if you do the math, it projects out to something like 160 million Americans say that they are stressed all the time. 6 out of the 10 in this study said that they had big stress, great stress, at least once or twice a week. I mean, things that stop you in your tracks. Many reported anxiety, depression, insomnia, tension, headaches. Some reported feeling helpless, hopeless. Some said that they didn't feel like life was worth living once or twice a week. You see, life is difficult. We can resonate with Genesis, can't we? And that's what it's trying to do. It's not trying to make a moral comment about it. It's trying to make a real comment about it. Life is difficult. At times, life is stressful. Mine is. I bet yours is. It's part of how we live. If I were really telling this story, if I were writing Genesis, I would say that. But I'd go beyond stressful. I think as much as life is stressful, I would also think that, life presents problems, and about half the time I can't figure out where they come from. Can you? Where did this come from in my life? I ask it all the time. Did I do this? Did Tom do this? Who did this? You catch it, Genesis is trying to say that. It's trying to find somebody to blame. Somebody must be at fault that my life is this way. I got to tell you a great story. The New York Times reported a real incident from Rome. A woman, her name is Concetta Briganta, was seen climbing out of a window on the 7th floor of an apartment building. Walked onto a ledge, and of course, you know what the people did. They called the police. We have a jumper, so the police came. They called the fire department. They tried to talk to her, but they couldn't get her attention very well. And so they brought fire trucks, tried to get up to her, couldn't get there. Tried to put a net under, thought 7 floors, that's kind of risky. So finally, they got a fireman to go out a window, crawl down, hook himself onto her, bring her back in, instantly arrested her and took her to the local mental hospital, which they did. Well, they finally slowed down enough to listen to her story. She wasn't going to jump. She's a housewife, a young mother. One child was in another room. She locked herself in the bedroom she was cleaning. So she climbed, okay, you got to go with me. She climbed out the window along the ledge to climb in her kitchen and realized she was scared to death and got stuck. See, that's a fabulous metaphor for life today. I live your lives, and I live my life. All of our lives are pretty similar. Lots of us are on ledges, and we have no idea how we got there. Or we got on the ledge, and we're trying to think, how did I think that was a good idea? You've ever done that? I do that a lot. Like, how did I think that was a good idea? Anyway. And then you add the one other thing that Genesis probably doesn't talk about, but we've got to talk about. His life is like a speeding bullet, and you're riding it. I said Wednesday when we started Lent together, the one thing, I say this all the time to you because I want you to hear you talking to us, the one thing that we talk about all the time here, my guess is everywhere, is how busy and fast we are moving. Everybody talks about it. I know a priest who was flying to Texas to do a teaching and preaching, and the congregation was really nice. They bought him a first-class ticket so he could have some time and space to lay his stuff out, read, get a drink, relax before he had to go down the next day and preach and all. So he got on the plane. He said he loved it, taking great care of him. And so the plane taxis, takes off, and he gets his stuff out and gets his books out to study. And he said, it's a small first class. There were 12 seats. And he looked up, and all 11 seats, all the seats were occupied, all the 11 were businessmen and businesswomen traveling for the week. And he said he looked up, and every one of them had a laptop, and they were going away at it, working, which they should be. They're on the job. They're working. Then he looked down in his lap. He had a Bible, a theology book, and a 14-inch yellow legal pad. And he went, and he laughed a little bit, and then he got this terrible feeling that he had had before. That somehow, once again, there was evidence he really was falling behind. That actually the world had passed him by. That the church that he served, the world had passed it by. And he said all he could think about was, Jim, life has passed you by. Life is passing you by. I don't mean it to be a downer. It's to talk about how life really is. Often when we don't want to talk about that. That's a bit of what we try to do in Lent, interestingly. We try to slow down to have a little thoughtful conversation, not about you, but me about me. In other words, I'm trying to have a thoughtful conversation about my life. I hope that's what you kind of spend some time doing these next weeks. Have a thoughtful conversation about your life. Because life is hard. We are stressed. We have lots of problems. And we are moving like a speeding train too often. What we miss sometimes when we so paint Genesis so severely is we miss also what it's trying to offer. Something that we know it's trying to offer, because you're not here accidentally. I mean, literally, an extra hour of sleep, you could have stayed in bed. As I say, you could be, over at the Copper Cellar reading the New York Times having a bagel or something. You could be at Starbucks. You could be somewhere, but you're here. We're here because we want something more in life. We really know that there is something more in life, and we're on the search for it. That's what I hope that we will join with Ewan and May as we bring them to baptism today. That we don't put them down for the questions they ask. We don't put them down for the directions they go. But what we say to them is, you're on the journey with us. This is the place that we ask these questions, but this is also the place that we find some hope. And we remind them they do not have to live life alone unless they choose to live life alone. Antoine Saint-Exupéry, the great novelist, he wrote The Little Prince. All of y'all know The Little Prince? He's a philosopher. Some of you don't know, he was also an aviator, an early aviator. And he wrote one time of flying at night, flying without instruments. And so he was having to fly by the compass and by the seat of his pants, and it was pitch black. And he said, he'd done it before, and it was one of those experiences that's always powerful because it's pitch dark. The moon was not out, so it was really a black, black night, stars in the sky. And he's flying along, and he said, he just was having just a wonderful experience. And then all of a sudden it came to him, he wasn't quite sure where he was. He said he realized he knew what vector he was on. He knew he was following the compass. He thought he knew his airspeed, ground speed equivalents. But all of a sudden he realized, and then he said this anxiety started creeping up. And he felt terribly alone up in that little plane. And then something also kind of helped but didn't help. Because on his headset, he could hear the chatter from the radio control tower somewhere out there. But he had no idea where. And he tried to call back, they couldn't hear him. So he kept every minute or two, he would call to them, his call sign, to see if they'd ping back. Nothing. He said, so in a way he felt like he had someone with him, but in a way he was more anxious. He said then finally he got in range of the tower because they heard him. And they talked, and he said, I think I know where you are, but I can't see anything. And he asked the field to turn the lights on and off several times on the runway so that he could distinguish those lights from the stars and the ambient other light around him. And he said he flew and he kept being anxious and watching, couldn't see them, and finally climbed over a hill. There was the runway lights on and off. And he knew then he would be safe. We started the year, I'll take you back. We started the year, the first Sunday of this year, reading the prologue of John. And in it, John wrote these words about God. A light shines in the darkness. A light darkness cannot overcome. A light shines in our darkness. A light that darkness of any kind cannot overcome. You see, Genesis is saying life is the way it is. But remember that each day, each step, each challenge, each adversity, each difficulty, and absolutely, as I look at these sweet babies, each joy, we have someone with us, helping us with some direction, helping us make meaning, helping us find our way. I hope during this Lent that you will reacquaint you with you, but you will also reacquaint you and God with you. And if we do our jobs, May and Ewan will be sitting here with us, raising their children, the same journey, looking for the same light. Amen.